All right, and welcome to another episode of Raul's World of Sense. This time around, we're going to be looking at the modulation of our two units here in front of us, the Doepfer A155 right here and the Doepfer A154 over here on our right. If you joined us last time, we were looking at a few other topics in the A155, 154 series, such as basics on the A154, the different modes, and so forth. Going into this one, what we're going to be doing is modulating each of the different sections that we've kind of talked about in the past. So, if you remember back in the last segment, if you watched it, or if you don't remember, we're going to be using an oscillator that we're actually triggering with this. We have CV notes going out from the A155 to our oscillator. We're not going to go too much into the oscillator. We're just going to kind of take a brief look at it. So let's go down and look at it right now. This is our oscillator that's being triggered. This gray cable that's passing through here is going over to the quantizer. And then from the quantizer, that signal is going out to our VCO. And then that VCO is going into our VCA, which is being triggered by this envelope here. And if we go up to the A155, we have some trigger outputs right here that are going down to trigger the gate of the A140, if you take a look right there. And then that envelope is shaping our VCA. But right now, if you look over here, we don't have any audio going out to our mixer. So let's patch that in so we can remember, if we were here last time, what it sounds like. So I'm patching into audio out, and I'm just going to go straight into my mixer. Here we go. Okay, so that's the kind of series of notes that we were working with last time around. This time we're going to be doing some modulation. So let's just start kind of in a sequential fashion, how appropriate, by going and modulating the top section. So in the top section we have, of course, the different modes, and if I move this dial here and I look at my A155, I have now changed the mode that it's running in. But wouldn't it be cool if I could modulate that and just change it without having to put my hand on it? So that's what we're going to use, if we look over here on the left, our A147 for. I'm just going to pipe in a simple waveform. Let's start with the triangle wave. And I'm just patching into that with my red cable here. And I'm going to patch right into my mode CV, right over here at my A154. There we go. Now, we shouldn't see any movement yet because our CV control is not up. So as I bring this up, we should see a little movement happen on our, there we go. And now it's moving through the different modes. So this just helps us vary the sequence that we're playing. If we look back to our A155, this helps us vary the sequence so that way it's not so static. If at any time I want to switch back to my original sequence, I can just time it and kind of wait until I hit forward and then bring my CV signal down over here on my A154. And then if I want to bring in the CV again, I can just bring it up. Now the higher the level here, the more that your modulation source, in this case the A147, is going to affect the movement over here. So if I bring up the CV attenuator a little higher, it should then go through all the different modes. There's backward, pendulum, random. Stays ever so slightly on random. Now I could sort of vary this a little bit by going over to my A147 and then bringing down the frequency of it. There we go. And now you can see that the modes that we're switching through are moving slightly slower than they were before. And you just find the frequency and the type of modulation that you want to use in your particular sequence. So So for the most part, that should be fairly straightforward. At least I hope it is. Moving right along, let's go over and maybe change, let's see, let's change our, let me unplug this for a moment. And we're in forward mode. I'm going to switch over to Pendulum Mode. So our default mode now is Pendulum Mode, and then I'm going to start to modulate that. So I'm going to bring my attenuator all the way down. I'm going to patch in my LFO, my A147 over here, and then I'm going to bring up my CV. And if it does what I expect, it should modulate that setting. Yeah, so then it returns back. Actually in a negative fashion in this case, because the shape of our triangle wave is making it move in one direction and then the other direction. But if you remember back in the last demo, we had, let me unpatch this. If we move this past random and past CV control, we then go into our one-shot modes, and then of course that's going to throw off our sequence. So a little bit of setup is required to kind of get something that's going to be fairly useful for you. But in general, that's kind of the idea of how the modulation at that particular input is going to work. I was kind of playing around prior to this demo, and I was looking at the CV control mode. So let's actually take a look at that, since we're going to be moving into the next section over here of our A154, where we're going to modulate the first step of our sequence. So I'm going to move over into CV control mode. And then in order for this mode to become useful to me, let me go ahead and start my sequence. I need to pipe some kind of CV into here, but I also need to bring up my CV as well. So I'm going to take, if I look at my A147, I'm going to take a sine wave this time, and I'm going to patch it right into the first CV. Here we go. All right. I'm going to bring this up ever so slightly. Still haven't got complete movement yet. There we go. I might need to bring up my frequency of my LFO so it'll change a little better. There we go. Now you're probably saying to yourself, well, that actually is just working like I would expect it to. It's modulating, but what's the difference between CV control mode then and modulating first step? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let me go to forward mode over here. And if you take a look at our A155, you can see that this modulation, even though it is modulating step 1 over here at the same level, or at our attenuator, is giving us a slightly different variation on our A155. So it's just another variation of which you can use to get a slightly different sound with your sequence. Just another option right here, CV control. You can further vary it. I'm going to go back to CV control mode. Let me go back down right there, just so you can hear the difference now. And you can see that that's notably different than what we had before. I'll go back to forward. And you can see every so often on the higher peaks of our A147 that it's sort of skipping and jumping up to a starting step. Okay. Now you can apply that to the backward mode if you want to. So if we listen to backward, and we continue to have the same modulation source, we again have another variation of our sequence. So it's all about variety. Now we can try into Pendulum Mode just to see what kind of results we get with that. And just to compare, why don't we listen to Pendulum Mode by itself? Bringing the attenuator down. Okay, so that's our unmodulated first step. And now let's modulate it a little bit. And you can hear right there it's already changing. Okay. So there you go. CV control mode as well as the first step modulation possibilities. There are a few other iterations. Of course, I could have started on a different step, like I could have moved it to step 2 and then modulated on the A155. I was actually modulating between step 1 and step 8, but if I wanted to, I could have set my first step for something like 4, like maybe 4 to 8, and then just modulated within those steps instead. I'm not going to run through every permutation, but I did want to show just the basic one here. So now that we have that, I'm going to unpatch my modulation source, and I'm going to actually switch to a different waveform. Let's go over here on our A147 and do the saw wave right there. This time we're going to modulate the last step. So I'm going to patch my cable into here, and as you can see, my attenuator is already up, so I should almost instantly, well, hopefully instantly, hear some change. I'm not hearing a lot of change. Let's try bringing up our attenuator. Maybe up the frequency. Okay, we're still not really getting that much activity here. Why don't we try a different waveform? Maybe the saw was not the best choice. Let's go up to triangle wave. Oh, immediately we have some change. So still within pendulum mode, however now we've slightly varied that pendulum mode by sending it a modulation source here, or I'm sorry, here from the A147 over to our modulation destination right there, and modulating the setting on our A154. Okay, so that's the basic idea. I'm going to unpatch that, and now we're just back in regular pendulum mode. And now we're going to modulate the clock CV. I'm going right down the panel. We have our clock CV right here, and we have a nice steady clock going right now. So why don't we try and modulate our clock? So I'm going to take a waveform from our A147. There we go. And then I'm going to patch it into our clock CV. We should hear change almost instantly. If you look over at the A155, there's a considerable amount of change going on our sequence. I can bring my frequency of my LFO down a little bit. Almost like a nice slide on a piano. I could choose a different waveform, so if I unpatch my sine wave, I could do, let's try saw wave again, let's give him another chance. Definitely got some interesting results this time around, modulating the clock with that. Why don't we actually bring our frequency down a little? Okay, so some fairly interesting results there to be found by modulating our clock CV. And just because we're here, let's unpatch the saw wave and let's try the triangle wave. may have been the one we did earlier. But if it is, we're hearing it again. Okay. And just as a test, why don't we unpatch that and try the square wave. Almost just like an on-off kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to unpatch that. So that was our clock being modulated.